Welcome to the annual gathering of our Living History Museum. It's truly a pleasure to have you all here with us today. Today's topic, segregation barriers in the Wild West. In the 1900s, a segregation barrier led to the creation of Carver High School. However, in 1953, this barrier crumbled in Arizona, preceding the rest of the country, causing Carver High to abruptly close. Even though this barrier was broken for the greater good, it caused even more short-term suffering. We are also extremely excited to welcome a very special guest speaker today. But first, let's start by learning about the barrier that separated African Americans and whites. Ever since slavery was abolished in the Civil War, racists were worried that they would lose their political, economic, and social power. They were afraid that African Americans would become their equals. So they passed laws that prevented African Americans from using public facilities. This new so-called separate but equal concept that seemingly justified segregation was only an excuse for white superiority. And Arizona was also just like the rest of the South, full of segregated Jim Crow laws and zoning laws. In fact, in 1909, before it even became a state, the Arizona Territory passed a law that said segregation in schools was legal when there were more than 8 African Americans. These African Americans had to go to school in separate rooms or separate buildings that had almost no teaching supplies and second-class curriculums. Now, to learn more about experiences in segregated schools, let's welcome our guest speaker, Nellie Williams. Well, my sister spent her school days in the cellar of the Phoenix Union High School. She said she never learned very much, and it was very cramped. The whites learned upstairs, with better books and newer equipment. The African Americans and the whites would get into huge fights at school. Sometimes someone would even break a bone or get badly injured. So a group of women decided to call for a separate school for African Americans. The Phoenix Union High School District then rented a tiny building for the new Phoenix Union Colored High School in 1918. Still, my sister had no educational equipment and no space. So the Phoenix Union High School District then bought a landfill for the new Phoenix Union Colored High School in 1926. This new school was dedicated on September 23rd. 1926. As almost 350 people packed the new auditorium, my sister listened to the dedication ceremony. She told me the most important part was the new AC system. She and all the other students were all excited to see all the new playing fields and the bleachers and all the new equipment they could use. But even though this new school was a huge step from the old one, they were still missing things from the curriculum, like microscopes. The African American teams could not play the white teams either. Later, when I went to Carver High in 1950, we had renamed it to Carver High because Phoenix Union High School was a name that taught us that we were inferior. The school board had also hired Mr. W.A. Robinson. He decided to make the best of the barrier that separated African Americans and whites. He refused to let us use hand-me-down textbooks and recruited teachers with master's degrees from all over the country. He even made sure that our African American teams could play the white teams. We were all so surprised to see a white man giving so much to us. Even more than the curriculum and the sports, Carver High was my family. There's no bullying there or being left out. Carver High set an example for an equal education for African Americans everywhere. It taught me and many others that we were just as good as whites and to always pursue our dreams. But this newfound joy didn't last for long. In 1950, 2 African Americans, Hazel Daniels and Carl Sims, were elected to the Arizona State Legislature. They decided to get rid of the segregation barrier that created Carver High once and for all. So on July 9th, 1950, Daniels and 3 other white attorneys filed a lawsuit concerning segregation a detrimental effect on them, imparting to them a stigma of inferiority, retarding their educational and mental development, and depriving them of some of the benefits that they could receive in an integrated school system. On February 8th, 1953, Judge Struckmeyer had delivered his decision. He said the 1909 segregation law was unconstitutional. And even though many Southern migrants came to Arizona and created these laws, their descendants were more open-minded and didn't show any major violent resistance. Another case, Heard versus Davis, had a ruling which said that all school segregation violated the 14th Amendment. Two cases in Arizona had achieved what the nation would achieve a year later in the national desegregation case of Brown versus Board of Education. In this case, the Supreme Court used these two cases in their arguments to integrate. But as a result of these rulings, Carver High had to close. I then realized that Carver High may have provided us an escape from racism, but racism would still be there. Carver High was only an exception to the bad quality schools built all across the country for African Americans. Carver High only strengthened the segregation barrier. Breaking the segregation barrier forever was the only way to true equality. Still, I felt sad to see Carver go. At my new integrated school, no one welcomed me like Carver High did. I was isolated from the others, and I often felt lonely. Many white students bullied me during school, and the teachers would never include me in school activities. I missed Carver High's teachers, who genuinely cared about their students, but were now busy teaching at other integrated schools. Another student I knew, Elizabeth Ragsdale, was diagnosed with depression, placed on lithium, and institutionalized at age 28 because of her experiences. She and many other African American students had to pay the price of integration with their own mental stability. But we didn't want to be at these integrated schools, but Carver High had taught us that we had to. If we didn't participate in integration, then who would? Carver alumni and Elizabeth Ragsdale were not the only ones who suffered the dark effects of integration. Students all over the country suffered too, because integration is like a double-edged sword. On one hand, there is the equality achieved by integration, but on the other hand, there are the hardships and the trauma that students of these newly integrated schools faced. The story of Carver High also shows us that when the court rules cases within the four walls of a building, the world does not instantly change. Desegregation of the country schools was a long, painful, windy journey that many students all over the country had to endure, not just the leaders. And generations later, many of them did continue to endure hardships, but their efforts have paid off. So today, our world now has African American CEOs, politicians, scientists, justices, judges, and recently, we even had our first African American president. Today, children of all races join hands and learn together at school because these Carver alumni made a really big sacrifice. The rise of Carver High shows us that any race performs to the same level when provided with equal educational opportunities. But more importantly, the fall teaches us that even ordinary people can come together and break extraordinary barriers through courage and sacrifice. We must remember Carver High and make the world a better place, a place where minorities don't face discrimination. Even today, even though Carver High is closed, its message has persevered on in hope of a better world.